Hi everyone, Gundam here for our 14th brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today, we're going back again to the Zeta era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we're going to explore the history of the second coming of the DOM line, its mechanical lore, variants, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Dreissen? Labeled as the AMX-009, the Dreissen, also sometimes referred as the DOM or Badaru, was a mass-produced general-use mobile suit deployed by Axis Zeon during the First Neo-Zeon War. The first official mass-production model to be adopted after the re-Christianization of Axis Zeon into Neo-Zeon, the Dreissen was a machine directly descended from the one-year war DOM series, basing itself on this proven design from the past to mix high performance on land with technological reliability. Indeed, the Dreissen was specifically created with the planned Earth invasion in mind, wanting itself as a superior ground mobile suit with exceptional close combat abilities, combination meant to easily overpower any AU gun Karaba forces remaining on Earth. To achieve this, the Dreissen recycled many design features of the original heavy mobile suit DOM, notably the use of large and bulky legs equipped with jet engines for high-speed gliding over the ground, while adopting many key technological innovations from its own era, notably Gundam alloy for its armor, a movable frame, and a new high-capacity generator, enabling it to power a new arsenal of specific beam-based weapons. This new arsenal of beam weapons first included the Dreissen most dangerous close-range asset, the combination of two separate unique weapons, the Beam Lancer and the Beam Tomahawk. A 1.7 MW rated piercing weapon, the Beam Lancer took the aspect of a staff-like beam saber, with a shorter blade with however a much higher penetrating capacity. The Beam Tomahawk was instead a 0.92 MW axe-type weapon, with a shorter reach than the Beam Lancer, but better fitted for slashing attacks. The true strength of both these weapons was however the unique ability to combine into a single Beam Naginata, a weapon with the reach and power output of the Beam Lancer and the slashing and shape of the Beam Tomahawk. Now, aside the Beam Naginata and its two components, the Dreissen also came equipped with a set of very versatile inbuilt weapons, a pair of wrist-mounted 2.8 MW rated triple beam cannons in each arm, enabling powerful suppressive fire and ranged abilities. Finally, the Dreissen also made use of a dual-mode assault beam rifle shared with the Bahu, and a handful of unique exotic weapons called the Three Blades. A sort of small funnel with high-speed rotating blades capable of locking on an enemy and reduce its own course thanks to an inbuilt vernier, the Three Blade was a very unique idea in a time where all remote control attacks were always performed via Psychomu or Quasi-Psychomu, enabling an old-type Dreissen pilot to overwhelm a target with its own loadout of three blades without the need of a complex and straining system like the one mentioned earlier. With all these weapons and features, the Dreissen was effectively a very successful ground-based asset, and despite its numerous weapons and size, managed to end up being lighter than the old DOM itself, mainly thanks to its lighter Gundam armor. This, combined with its capacity to perform very decently in space, eventually made it possible to adopt the model as a general-purpose model rather than letting it fall in the heavy mobile suit category, a category few of the DOM spawns ever managed to escape. This being said, the Dreissen was far from being a flawless mobile suit, suffering from numerous issues in its own design. First of all, the Dreissen leans too much into the close-range mobile suit side, with most of its best aspects and features being designed primarily to excel in that particular field, making the suit an excellent pick for aces, but less interesting for less skilled average pilots. Secondly, the Dreissen also suffered from a major structural design flaw, which was the exposure of the powering cables supplying its wrist-mounted triple cannons. This effectively made the inbuilt weapon prone to malfunctions and neutralization, as even slightly damage to these exposed cables would immediately lead to the triple cannons becoming unusable, depriving the Dreissen from its best ranged asset. Nonetheless, the model would prove its worth during the First Neo-Zeon War, mainly against the Gundam team, and would lead to the Dreissen remaining in use for almost 30 years, spawning variants left and right and spiritual successors along the way. But that's enough setting for today, let's cover this lore. The year is Universal Century 88. At that time, the so-called First Neo-Zeon War was entering its early stages, with the Earth Federation, carried by its reformist splinter branch known as the AUG, waging a seemingly losing battle against the retro Neo-Zeon movement, Axis-Zeon. Following the conclusion of the Bloody Grips conflict, leading to the mutual exhaustion of the AUG and the Titans, thus putting the Earth Federation in a precarious position, Axis-Zeon had then become the dominant military power, hell-bent on achieving total dominion over the entire Earth sphere. With its preserved manpower, large and self-reliant industrial capabilities, and impressive R&D resources, Axis had thus proceeded to quickly subjugate most of the Earth sphere, leading to its self-proclamation as Neo-Zeon, the rebirth of the Principality of Zeon of the Old. However, despite all these early successes, Neo-Zeon soon found its blooming rule contested by many actors, be it struggling Earth Federation and AUG units, an unlikely unit of ragtag Gundam pilots stationed on a famous white ship, or even simply the AUG Earth-based counterpart, Karaba, which had survived the previous conflict in a better shape than its space-based ally, and was now even sending its own pilots to refill the AUG depleted ranks. With the seat of the Federation political power being still located in Dakar, the Neo-Zeon regime soon turned its sights toward Earth itself, planning to replicate what the Principality of the Old had once attempted during the One-Year War, launching a full-scale invasion of the Blue Planet. However, unlike the old attempt of its predecessor, Axis' plan was about finally squashing the Federation, not by destroying it outright and conquering it, but rather by overwhelming and pressuring its leadership hard enough to force an official conversion of the old Federation into a brand new Zeon nation. In any case, this decision of carrying this Earth invasion, coinciding with Axis rebranding itself as Neo-Zeon, was also moved forward alongside a series of new mobile suit development projects, all carried out in parallel and bringing together multiple departments of Axis military complex. This Earth invasion-related recollection of development projects officially started around early March UC88, was started with the primary goal of boosting the mobile suit capabilities of Neo-Zeon, diversifying its mobile suit lines to reduce its over-reliance on the aging Gaza series, to instead adopt a group of newer and more performing models, all designed from the get-go to take into account the planned Earth invasion. In parallel, this project also aimed to review the new technological trends of the time, even the ones brought by the Earth Federation, such as the movable frame that all the Neo-Zeon models spawned by this project would incorporate in one way or another. Another notable aspect of the project was that it was completed with the expertise of a lot of former engineers formerly serving the Principality of Zeon, not only Axis ones, but even some that had been scattered in the Earth sphere after the One-Year War and that joined the Titans, the AUG, or even Anime Electronics. The return of this diaspora of old-timers considerably influenced the doctrine that the project would influx to all its new creation, being the primary reason behind the return of more traditional Zeon team features that all these new mobile suits would adopt. Speaking of these mobile suits, it is technically unknown how many this recollection of projects was exactly working on, but at least 3 of them are given straight away in the lore, all allegedly designed and delivered around the same time. Among these mobile suits was first a heavy armor close range specialist designed from both the Zaku and Goof series and made to put an emphasis on urban combat, a machine codenamed AMX-009 or Gallus J. This Gallus J was supposed to work in tandem with the second creation of the project, the AMX-102 Tsa, a groundliness support mobile suit designed around the use of a large missile bay booster to carpet bomb locations to pave the way for the Gallus assaults. The third mobile suit, the firstborn of this project and the mobile suit that interests us today, was no other than the AMX-009, the Dreissen itself, a direct dome-type relative aimed at ground superiority and the first real general-purpose model created by Neo-Zeon. Now, from which depth of technological held was the Dreissen developed from is not exactly sure, with other sources considering it is more or less a brand new creation and a spiritual successor of the Dome series, but this time with modern technologies. Newer sources instead mention that the Dreissen, while created as a successor to the Dome, was designed by engineers formerly involved in the Rigdom 2 development, reason why the Dreissen is not a pure land-based mobile suit like the Dome or a pure space mobile suit like the Rigdom, but a polyvalent one like the Rigdom 2. In any case, the Dreissen wasn't at that stage exactly in its final form, being still in a prototype state as the mobile suit known as, well you guessed it, the prototype Dreissen. While similar to its future mass-produced brethren, the prototype Dreissen did have its share of differences, notably when it came to its own backpack. Indeed, the well-known and well-loved regular Dreissen backpack, which included the famous 3 blades, was absent from this early model, leaving place for a different variant. This proto-backpack, equipped with additional verniers and propellant tanks, was designed to put an emphasis on cruising range and mobility in space, a philosophy more in line with the Gundam 2 early design philosophy. In addition to that, the prototype Dreissen also differed when it came to its beam arsenal loadout, equipping a large Mega Bazooka launcher, a weapon of the same class than the Dowa's beam bazooka, and conceptualized as being a mini version of the Hyper Mega launcher. For a time, the Proto Dreissen also featured a weaker generator than its future brethren, equipping lower output beam cannons in its rift until the generator design was improved. Now, from all the info collected, it seems the prototype backpack also included a sub-generator in some form, which is the only way the Proto Dreissen could power its beam bazooka with a weaker generator, considering the Dreissen lost that functionality from a lack of generator output, but more on that later. In itself, the prototype Dreissen was highly satisfactory, but eventually underwent minor revisions before achieving its final form. First of all, informations collected thanks to the war waging out outside made the engineering team realize that upon being unleashed on Earth, the Dreissen would spend a lot of time locked in close combat with enemy mobile suits, which led to a refitment of the equipment plan of the Dreissen prototype to prepare it to excel in close-range ground combat. The Dreissen notably gained there its signature Beam Naginata gimmickal weapon, but also got outfitted with a different backpack, ditching the verniers and propellant tanks for the set of 3 blades. Unfortunately, the addition of the 3 blades, which like funnels would need to be powered and recharged by the suit generator, caused the engineering team to have to modify the circuitry path to take that into account, resulting in the Dreissen being now unable to power its Mega Bazooka, unlike the prototype Dreissen, resulting in the weapon being scrapped. From these revisions, the Dreissen was now born, although it didn't stop the original prototype Dreissen from being fielded on the battlefront, being handed over to Barn Vixet, an Axis-Yon formerly AUG ace known as Blackbird Barn, as a replacement for his old Rick Diaz. Barn Proto Dreissen would adopt the blackish and purple colors of the original Dom and would be used to fight on the behalf of Neosian aristocrat Froton Roth Hergis. But let's go back to our completed regular Dreissen. Upon completion, the Dreissen was then brought to an evaluation committee, where it was, alongside the Gallows J and Tsa, compared to other candidates according to various criteria, notably about easiness of piloting, production cost, gimmicks, but also primarily its ability to outcompete usual AUG machines in basic performance. Now, something I haven't touched yet is that this completion evaluation stage didn't happen overnight, but only near the summer UC88, thanks to long production delays in the development of not only the Dreissen, but all of its competitors as well. Such delays were mainly caused by Neozeon crew lack of raw materials, with Axis possessing enough to engage in limited production, but nowhere the number needed for such large-scale development projects, one of the main reasons why Axis was hell-bent on engaging its Earth invasion operation. As a result, the Dreissen, Gallows J, Tsa and many others were all forced to over-specialize their designs to balance high performance for a minimum amount of resources used, a situation which more or less spared the Dreissen, which only over-focused on close-range combat, but molded for example the Gallows J and Tsa inner designs. In all cases, all 3 models eventually passed the contest and were all put to limited production, then mass production as the first Neozeon war continued. Now functional and mass-produced, the Dreissen was eventually unleashed on both Earth and in space as well, and despite proving its high performance against many enemy forces, notably the Gundam team, never really became the mainstay of Neozeon thanks to the everlasting existence of the Gaza series and then the Zaku 3 and Dove and Wolf appearance in the final stages of the war. Following the conclusion of the first Neozeon war, the Dreissen would continue serving faithfully various Neozeon remnant groups as late as UC96, with at least 2 units being still in the possession of the Sleeves and being stationed on Palau, the first being put out of its misery by the Unicorn Gundam, and the other surviving, with its pilot retiring afterwards. These sleeves-owned units would be decorated with the organization's signature sleeves markings, while also improving the triple wrist beam cannons by internalizing the exposed power cables, a modification that fixed the original flow design while also increasing the output of the cannons. These units would also often replace two of the experimental and frankly quite janky 3 blades for the good old and reliable heat saber, only keeping one of such 3 blades for diversion purposes. In the manga version of Gundam narrative, the Republic of Xion would also acquire 3 of these sleeves modified units, handing them over to the White 3 Stars, aka the Maidens of Neo Xion, an all-woman ace trio assigned to support Zoltan Akanen. But let's go back all the way up to UC-88, this time far away from the Earth sphere. Around the same time the first Neo Xion war raged, Axis Xion started forming ties with another Xion remnant power base, this time outside the Earth sphere, Mars Xion. Now, in the late UC-80s, Mars Xion was still divided between different rivaling groups, mainly a Kisila loyalist faction, Xion Mars, and a Giren loyalist faction that would later become known as Xion. With the help and support from Axis, Xion Mars eventually gained the upper hand in their struggle against Xion, taking control of Arcadia, the original Martian settlement, thus cementing their initial victory. This support from Axis mainly took the form of a giveaway of blueprints and advanced technologies to Xion Mars, provided in exchange of the promise that Xion Mars would then raise a massive army to support Axis in the Earth sphere once secures a foothold in the Martian sphere. The newly completed Dreissen was part of these mobile suits, which blueprints were transferred to Xion Mars, with the Martian regime soon using their secure industrial assets to produce a variant of it. This new variant, known as the AMX-009 Dom 3, was technically to the Dreissen what the Dom was to the Rick Dom of the old, abandoning all space use capabilities left in the Dreissen to over-specialize only in ground combat. First of all, the Dreissen original shoulder design, packed with verniers for higher maneuverability in 0G, was removed in favor of a pair of new blockage sections, each equipped with a twin set of booster thrusters to enable smooth and even faster hovering ability on the ground. To complement this first change, the original Dreissen backpack thrusters were also removed, being instead outfitted with the same hover unit of the Xion Mars Saku 3 RG. Now, all these changes were not really meant to give the Dreissen hovering ability per se, as it already possessed them to some degree, but rather to make them relevant enough to excel in the Martian sphere in its lower gravity, ditching the complex systems of the Dreissen meant to switch between 0G and 1G. Aside these changes, the Dom 3 remained however particularly similar to its predecessor, keeping the overall same design and inbuilt armaments while still adopting new handheld weapons. The Beam Lancer, Tomahawk and Naginata were indeed ditched in favor of a regular heat saber, leading to a hardpoint taking the place of one of the 3 blades, while a new Beam Bazooka was paired with the Dom 3 for enhanced firepower. These changes, along with the new Dom-like paint scheme, were adopted to follow Xion Mars ideology, which designed its mobile suits to directly emulate old Principality of Xion designs, a far cry from the rivals of Xion that prefer Titans-derived or new designs, but similar to their eventual descendants of the Mars Xion independent forces seen in the late UC. But more on that later. Once finalized, the Dom 3 was eventually put to mass production, being gladly welcomed by Xion Mars pilots, notably for its closer similarity to the Dom than what the previous Dreissen was, and thus its return to the proper heavy mobile suit class. When the moment came, the Dom 3s were eventually shipped as part of the Chester fleet, a massive fleet sent by Xion Mars to support Axis as promised. However, the Chester fleet arrived too late to support Neo Xion in time, and upon witnessing the civil war between Ahmad Khan and Clemi Toto, turned their back from the Earth sphere, returning to Mars in Mars. Upon returning in UC-89, Xion Mars would discover that Xion had used their absence to take over Mars, and after a massive battle in Martian orbit, the Chester fleet would be annihilated, primarily thanks to Xion's new technological assets. The Chester fleet would however live on, continuing guerrilla operation against Xion from the Martian deserts, with some surviving Dom 3s being repainted in yellow desert colors for camouflage purposes. Now, Advent of Zeta reboot ending and mechanical files hints at two different but connected things. First, the ending displayed the rise of Chester Jr., son of Zion Mars hero Outlaw Chester, with the young officer being proclaimed as Loud Chester, or Chester, after his successful takeover of the Olympus mountain base, where Zion had put him and his men to hard labors. This not only portrayed the family future Mars-Zion ace Charles Rochester would come from, but also explained the legacy state of Mars-Zion, with Zion Mars reforming around the captured Olympus base and being reborn as the future Mars-Zion independent movement, while Zion would eventually pacify on its own and fall back to the original Arcadia city borders, being still kicking around on its own even in the early UC 150s. Secondly, the DOM 3 mechanical files also indicate the DOM 3 would over the years serve as a base for future Zion Mars developments, culminating in the early UC 120s into the well-known and well-famed RF DOM. Codenamed AMX-009 RF, the RF DOM was what you would eventually get by bastardizing the DOM 3 with the Geradoga technology, with an even more outrageous sugar coating to make it look even more like the one-year-old DOM. Now, to understand the RF DOM, you have to take into account the model exists in two different forms, what I will label as the original model and the all-mobile war model. Like all RF units, as portrayed in the original F90 manga, the RF DOM was initially designed in its original model form, replicating bit by bit the external look of its one-year war ancestor, in this case the DOM. Now, the twist was that despite this external layer, the RF DOM was a massive upgrade over what the enemy would expect it to be, featuring a general performance reaching nearly 145% of the old Dreissen capacities, thanks to much newer sensor, generator, and overall propulsion systems. This original form of the RF DOM would however be quickly ditched after the defeat of Mars-Zion during Gundam F90 UC 120 events, with the organization revamping the external aspect of the mobile suits for their return in UC 122. Thus came the real RF DOM, or what I call the all-mobile war version, the second iteration of the RF DOM adopted by Mars-Zion. Keeping all the internal specs of the original RF DOM model, the all-mobile war variant differed from its previous incarnation almost only through its external frames and assets, ditching the replica DOM aspect a bit to become even more functional. Aside revealing all its previously hidden new verniers and thrusters, the new RF DOM mainly received a new complement of powerful inbuilt weapons, including a pair of beam showers, powerful scattering megaparticle cannons mounted on its chest, a Vulcan gun, and a pair of two-rack shooter-mounted grenade launchers. This new variation would mainly be used during the second short all-mobile conflict of UC 122, being mainly deployed on Earth during Mars-Zion failed invasion of Earth, but also in space, participating like their ancestor the DOM 3 as machines for the reformed Chester fleet. During the war, the new RF DOM would also end up spawning two environmental variants, a cold climate type and a desert type, both designed to better adapt to their respective environments. Both variants would encounter the Gundam F90 with different mission packs, and both would suffer great casualties, courtesy of the F90 high performance and its pilot Bergskred rising abilities. And with the RF DOM, heads up the journey of the Dreissen and its spawns, fulfilling their role as a real extension of the DOM and Rig DOM's lines. This video comes to an end. Marco and Code out.
But who will survive?